Hello and welcome to another episode of the DigiTeacher Digest. This week I'd like to look at, I suppose, the whole question of the digital divide and the power of technology to transform society in two directions. I think all technologies have a kind of utopian aspect, their best use, something that they can do that might improve society and be good for all of us. They also have a dystopian side, how they could be used to dominate and oppress us. And the tension between these two factors is always there with technology, and not least with computers, because they are such powerful media, both of expression, but also of control. Google tracks everything we do. We have no privacy left. And what happens to all that data? All that information that's collected by Facebook and Google and Microsoft, and how might it be used to oppress us? But the internet undoubtedly also offers us a chance to express ourselves and to participate in ways which were unimaginable on a global scale before. This tension between domination and democracy, I think, lies as a central contradiction within both education and within technology. And it's something I think that we as teachers have an absolute imperative to try and be on the side of right, to be on the side of participatory democracy. So how to kind of sum all of that up? Well, about 20 years ago, I read a book by Mark Warshai, Electronic Literacies, Language, Culture and Power in Online Education, and it transformed my ways of thinking. Computers are two things, I suppose. And when you hear teachers talking about computers as collectors of data, big data and all of that, I always get very, very nervous. Because if you think about it, any collection of data of students while they're in a learning environment, developing minds and all of that, is very powerful information. It's something which could be used absolutely to dominate. So I wrote a short science fiction story a few years ago, which was basically along the theme of collection of data for learning purposes. And if you know how people learn, how you might be able to control them later in life. So I'm very wary of companies that come into the educational space and offer this kind of big data approach. What data are they collecting and who owns that data? But computers are also communication devices, and communication opens up the ability of people to talk to each other. It opens up the possibility for participatory and more democratizing forms of communication. It opens up the possibility of giving power to students' voice. So what is this tension between giving voice to giving power to student voice and giving students access to the kinds of voices of power that they need, the kind of standard knowledge that will get them ahead? For example, in much of the world, access to learning English, for example, as an international language, or learning the right dialect of English to enable you to get ahead. Our schooling system globally is very much a divided one. On the one hand, we have elite schools where students are prepared to become leaders in the new information economy, leaders in society. So they are taught to think critically. They are taught to synthesize, analyze, evaluate data. They are taught to be creative, to use creative packages to express themselves and give full range to their voice. They are given access to every language of power, including information technology, that is needed. They are being taught to become leaders in society. Other schools, people are being taught to become hewers of wood and carriers of water, basically, in the new information economy. So even in IT classes, they are taught to be data enterers. How do you use a spreadsheet to enter data? How do you use a database, Word and so forth, so that you can type a message and be thoroughly clerical? They are the workforce of the information economy. They are not expected to take decisions, and their education does not really focus on critical thinking. This divide is a terrifying one, I think, for teachers, because I would like to believe that every single teacher would want their students to have an outcome in that first category, to have the chance to become a leader in society, rather than just to become part of the zombie workforce. And yet the whole schooling system is set up with that divide in mind. I've worked on both sides of that divide, and you absolutely, as a teacher, you kill yourself. When you are in a school which is really preparing people for the workforce rather than for leadership roles, as a teacher, you kill yourself to try and maximize the access that you're able to give students. It's a soul-destroying task, because everything in the system militates against you being able to do that. It takes a huge amount of energy and effort. On the other hand, when you're working in an elite school, everything runs on smooth rails. The whole system is set up to enable it. You're given plenty of time to think, time to plan, time to get your resources together. So in just one simple metric, when I was working in an inner city school, I had 2 free periods a week. I was in a computer lab, and I was expected to maintain that lab as well, fix the lab, fix things that were going wrong. I had, in effect, no time at all to think, to plan, to do anything. Everything would have to be done after hours, taking away from, obviously, personal time and ability to recuperate. I was exhausted most of the time. In the current school, time is given, because your input as a teacher, your ability to plan and to produce lessons of quality, is what is being valued. So you are given access to that time in terms of free periods, so that you are able to produce the goods. So when thinking about the digital divide, I think there are 2 levels that one needs to take into consideration. The first is a kind of formal access to devices. The students have access to computers or laptops, tablets, or even cell phones that they can use connected to the internet, so that they have that kind of access available to them for learning how to research, find knowledge, and so on. But secondly, what is being done with that equipment? So in some schools, there are no devices. There's no internet connection and so on, and that's a very obvious form of digital divide. Very often, devices are pushed into a school and then, problem solved. Wash your hands of it. They've now got the devices. But what's being done with those devices is not really giving students access to the kinds of powerful knowledge that they need. Students are not really learning how to do their own research, how to do their own research critically. They're not being taught how to think. They're not being taught how to use digital devices to be able to communicate effectively, to communicate creatively and express themselves. So that level of digital divide, I think, is far more prevalent and far more problematic than the first. The first is more obvious, and I think companies and governments kind of fairly quickly move in to fill those gaps. I'd like to think so anyway. But the second level of lack of access, I think, often goes unreported, unseen, unthought about. And that is the real digital divide. So I want to tell a little story, and the story is, well, I suppose it's my adventures with this book, really. Because at that time I was teaching in an inner city school, and we had a computer room. So we had access to computers. There was that first level of digital access. Students would come in, I think, about once a week for a generalist, class in grade 8 and 9, where they were introduced to computer literacy. And then we ran computer applications technology, and for a time computyping in the lab as well as a subject, grade 10 to matric. But students had access. They could come into the lab if it was free, and they could use it. But the computers were not linked to the internet. So in a sense, that was a very limiting factor. So I tried to overcome that by, if I needed students to have access to particular websites, I would download the website onto a stiffy disk, yes, it was that long ago, and load it up onto the server. And then that website would be, they would be able to access that website from the server rather than from the internet. And the message I want to give to teachers is, no matter how dire your situation, no matter how few resources you have, you need to kind of do what you can. So my solution there to no internet was to download it 1 or 2 websites a day and load it up onto the server on a range of topics, partly on IT and partly on general topics that students needed access to for life orientation or history or whatever it was. But I was also concerned to try and give that kind of access, which I think students need, to agency, a sense of confidence in their ability to use technology to go beyond just doing a job. A sense that technology is something that is their servant and not the other way around. That it's not something that dominates your life that you don't quite understand. It's something that you can control, that you can tweak, that you can change, that you are in control of. So I set up a program where we learned HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and we started creating a school website. And I had a group coming into the computer room every lunchtime and working away on the website. And I found that very empowering personally, and I hope the students found it empowering as well. But what I saw was a sense of gathering confidence, a sense of gathering agency, a sense that students could use technology to find their voice and express themselves to a world beyond. And I hope that in some small way that gave the kind of access to voices of power that students need. Certainly technology is an important voice of power. I know it was only website, it wasn't full coding. There was a little bit step beyond. I had to teach myself as I went along. So I had to teach myself how to create websites so that I could teach students. It was empowering for me. And I know that many of my students did go on to get jobs in IT, and I hope ultimately decision-making jobs and access to a wider economy and a wider view of humanity in control of the technology rather than the other way around. I'd like to take a moment just to read from Mark Warshar's book. And he writes on page 177, "These dynamic and interactive capabilities of the internet make it potentially more subject to control from below than other mass media, such as television, film, or the press. At least in the industrialized countries, the internet creates possibilities for more people than ever to have a voice in society. But there is a difference between a medium and a voice. For students of diverse cultural, linguistic, and class backgrounds to have a voice, they need more than an internet account. Rather, they need knowledge of the languages and discourses of power and opportunities to reflect critically on whether, when, and how to use them, as well as opportunities to develop and use their own dialects and languages as they wish. They need access to and mastery of a variety of media and understanding of the ways that rhetorical structures and media interact. And they need chances to read, write, and think about issues of cultural and social relevance for their lives as they work together and with others near and far to tackle authentic, complex problems collaboratively." Wow. In a nutshell, for me, that's it. That's what we have to do as teachers. That's our mission. Well, certainly as computer teachers, computers of literacy, English teachers, IT teachers, we have to give students access to the kinds of powerful knowledge that they need to succeed and to explore the power of their own voice.